Hello, welcome to the Maya Toolbelt. This is Michael. So today I wanted to talk about another command under the Mesh menu, and it's called Conform. Conform, and you can see it here. It's under the Remesh section of this menu. Remesh. So remesh, essentially, this section does a lot to change how a model looks. It adds or reduces polygons and changes or modifies the mesh in some way, in a way that is kind of algorithmic. Okay, it's not like a manual change where you're moving and pushing points around and filling and extruding and so on. You're like, click a button and it does something with an algorithm to remesh or to reconstruct the object. And conform is one of these options, the first one here in the list. So conform, if I go into the options of this setting, hit edit reset settings. Okay, so now back to defaults here. Not a whole lot of settings in here. We have projection along normals or closest point. And then we have surface offset with a slider and a value. Okay, so we'll get back to those in a bit. Let's just kind of go over what it does in general. So first of all, it needs to have two meshes. One of them is set to be live. Okay, and we'll talk about what that is too. So first of all, I'm going to create a sphere. Again, just to demonstrate what it does, I'll hide the grid. So here's a sphere here. I'm just going to freeze transformations, delete history, that kind of stuff. Again, in case you don't know, these three blue buttons here, the first one here is center pivot, middle one, delete history, third one here, freeze transformations. So I do these middle and third buttons here all the time. Delete history and freeze transformations. Then I'll go to create polygon primitives and I'll grab a plane. So a flat square surface. Scale it up a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just going to rotate it, say 90 degrees, like so. And I just kind of place it here next to the sphere, like this. Go ahead and freeze transformations, delete history. Same idea. So this has 10 divisions up and down the surface of the plane, and then we have the sphere over here. So I'm going to select the sphere, and up here in the UI of Maya, up here in the status line, we have these magnet icons, and these first few magnet icons are referring to snapping. Like this one here is snap to grid, snap to curve, snap to point, and so on. The very last one though, where it looks like just a magnet, you can see here it says, the tooltip will tell you, make the selected object live. Okay, so it makes it a live surface. So I'm just going to select the sphere and click on this magnet, and you'll see here that in this little box it now has pSphere 1, which is what the sphere is called, set here to be live. Here's pSphere 1 right there. And when I select it over here in the outliner, you'll see here that it turns this kind of dark green outline, and I can still move it and stuff if I select it in the outliner like I did. But otherwise, if I just try to click on it, it won't let me select it. It's essentially not allowing me to modify it unless I manually grab it over here. I press the 4 key for wireframe. You can see here that green wireframe. Hopefully you can see that okay. So it's different, right? This plane over here is not live. Only one object can be live at a time, and this plane is not live, and it's able to be selected like normal. And okay, and so on. So press 5 key to go back to shaded view. Here we go. So now I'm going to select the plane. So this command requires some object in general to be live. Okay, so I'm going to select the plane. We have a live object in the scene. I'll go to Mesh, Conform. You can see here what it did. I can just kind of pull it back away again. It conformed to the shape of the sphere of the live object. So this plane the points got modified to kind of wrap around the sphere a bit. I can kind of move it around. You can see it's kind of keeping within the confines of the sphere. I can pull it out like this, but then if I try to move it again, it kind of snaps back. So this it's kind of waiting for me to do something else now as far as how this conform works. I can go to Mesh Conform again, and you can see here it like really squashes down and so on. That's because it was, if I hit undo, it has this angle here. If I were to do this properly, I would want to rotate it, so that the vertices are a bit more uh, able to see the sphere, if you will. Like I'm going to drape the plane over the sphere. Again, mesh, conform. You see there, it kind of snaps back on there. Anyway, if I were to make the sphere not live anymore, I click this little magnet icon. Okay, make live is disabled, it says there. I can select the sphere again. And now if I move this plane, it doesn't try to like prevent me from moving it or anything like that. It doesn't snap anywhere. So, in general, let me just look at that. So what this conform essentially does is it wraps the vertices of one object onto the surface of another object, okay? Just in general. So that's essentially what it does. So you can imagine probably there are lots of ways we could probably work with this. So we can do something a little more interesting. Let's say if I were to modify this sphere a little bit to get a bit of a different shape. So it's not just round. There we go, just something like this. And maybe I'll go ahead and just smooth it, mesh smooth. There we go, so I have a lot more vertices involved here for this sphere. Delete history, freeze transformations. And now I'll make a new plane again. Create polygon plane, there we go. Scale it up real big. Rotate 90 degrees. All right, let's try this again. Now with this shape. Select the object, make it live by clicking the rightmost magnet icon. Grab the plane. I'm going to mesh conform. Okay, so we got this going on now. So not quite as clean as the last one. We do have a lot more shape undulations happening here. But let's look at some of the options though. Let me undo this. I'll go to mesh conform options. So projection method. The default is along the normals. The second one is closest point. Let's try closest point and conform again. All right, so now we have this happening. So again, it's trying to kind of snap to the surface with the closest point. Now this plane may not be the best option for this particular shape. So let me try a different shape. Let me try a cylinder maybe. I'm going to create polygon primitives and I'll do a cylinder. All right, so now we have something like this. So let's see what this does. I'm going to go to, again, mesh, conform. All right, so it's kind of pulling these vertices around. Now I'll go back to mesh, conform options. Let's show you long normals. Let me undo that first. Okay, so we have this different look here. So again, it's kind of pulling it toward the object. So different ways of doing it, along the normals, along the surface direction, what normals are, the surface direction, or just the closest point. We'll try to snap to the closest point. Now the surface offset, if we try to get close enough, you can kind of see how it's got a little bit of distance here between the live object and the cylindrical shape. Hit undo there. If I take this close surface offset down to 0 and do it again, you can see how it conforms right to the edge of the surface. So again, offset, apply, we got a gap here. That's what that's doing. It's kind of keeping it a little bit at bay, not quite getting it right on to the object. And I can, if I type in the number like 5, you can have a higher value than 0.1. There we go. So see here I have a much larger offset. Okay. And one thing another to keep in mind, you can just keep on clicking it over and over again. It's going to get kind of messy though. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm going to do all that. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind, let me delete history on this cylinder shape and I'm going to do this again. So projection along normals will say a surface offset, we'll make it like, I don't know, 1.5. And then conform. Okay, so now we're getting this, but keep in mind over here, there's no history listed here. Typically when you do a command in Maya, usually you'll have something pop up over here, some kind of history item where you can like maybe click on it and change the settings afterwards, try to fine tune it and such. Nothing's really showing up here for this particular command. If I go to attribute editor, I don't really have anything up here, no tabs for this conform command that we applied. So in order to like really modify this, even if I could click on the original sphere and try to move it, nothing really changes. It's not like a live manipulation of the surface. You have to kind of just undo it and do it again and eyeball it a bit. I will say here that with what I have here now, with the offset of what I did and using the options I did, this shape is a little bit more usable. And I wouldn't say it's conforming all that well to the shape I'm targeting. I'm actually going to kind of compress this down a bit and see if I can maybe get this to conform a little bit more than I'm getting so far. I'm just even going to intersect it a little bit and see what happens. Get a little bit of an experiment. So now I'm going to select it. I'll go to Mesh, Conform. Hey, look at that. That's actually almost usable. See that? So lots depends on how the objects are positioned with each other and these values. Let me go back into the settings again. Mesh, Conform, Options. So here I'm kind of intersecting this cylinder through my live object along normals with a surface offset of 1.5. I'll actually go ahead and pick this down to like 0.1 again and conform. Hey, look at that. That actually, we're getting here to something that's actually practical, right? Where this might be useful, potentially. For example, one thing I can see using this for, which is what I do use it for, is for a high poly, like really highly dense high poly model, and then you want to make like a low poly video game model that you can bake in Substance Painter or something like that. This can make this process a little bit easier to create that low poly mesh that kind of conforms to the shape of the high poly mesh using something like this. Again, it's a little bit of trial and error, okay? But under Mesh, Conform, Options, we can go to try closest point, for example. Hit Apply, getting something like this. Okay, a little bit different. Undo that, along normals, Apply, and then we get something like this. That's probably a bit more useful as far as what looks like I'm trying to do here as far as conforming to this particular shape. So it takes a little bit of trial and error, I will say. Your situation, your mileage may vary, as they say, depending on how you use this. But if you find the right magic combination of position and surface offset versus which projection method works best, you can definitely find something useful. That might be, hopefully, didn't take you longer to do this than it would have been just to make it yourself manually already. Again, the idea is that this should hopefully make your workflow faster, not slow you down. But I think that's pretty much it as far as the conform command goes. If anybody has any questions or anything I missed, feel free to comment below. Don't forget you can click on this little magnet icon to make the live object not live, like that. And then I can use this. It's a separate object again I can manipulate. There's no history involved again. So again, it's usually with history, what I would expect a lot of times is if I were to change this model now, this one would update because of history, but it doesn't do that. So keep that in mind too. All right. Well, hopefully that was useful. Hopefully you found that interesting. If you, again, have any questions, comments, if you have any suggestions for future video topics, please feel free to comment below. Like, subscribe, and all those kind of wonderful YouTube things. And I will see you next time.